In 1997, St. Mary of the Assumption Catholic Church in Park City completed this new church building to accommodate the growing number of parishioners and attendees at Mass. As a parish, we're truly blessed to have a vibrant and active faith community. And this is our goal as Catholics. We want to share the truth of Catholicism with as many people as possible. But the truth of Catholicism is not always easy to accept, even among Catholics. This is even true during the public ministry of Jesus. This past Sunday, we finally finished our gospel readings on the Bread of Life discourse in John chapter 6, in which Jesus affirms that his flesh is true food that gives life to the world. As we reach the end of this story, there seems to be a lot of tension in this moment. Jesus has been incredibly popular up to this point. At the very beginning of the story, we see over 5,000 people come to hear and see him and witness this miracle that shows them that he is the Messiah. But now, there's a sort of standoff between the crowds and Jesus. His message here is very unsettling to the crowds, that you must eat his flesh in order to have life within you. So they tell him, "This saying is hard. Who can accept it?" Put yourself in the shoes of this crowd. A man has just performed a miracle that clearly indicates that he is the Messiah. But he begins to teach something so strange that it makes everyone hesitant to continue to follow him. Despite this, Jesus insists on standing behind this message. It's a very sad moment. Because of this specific teaching on his flesh as true food, many of his disciples decided to stop following him. Not a few of his disciples, not some of his disciples, many of his disciples. These were the same people who continued to follow him even as he seemed to present himself as equal to God a chapter earlier in the Gospel of John. For whatever reason, they felt that this message of the bread of life just went too far. They spent their entire lives waiting for the Messiah. They recognized him as the Messiah, and yet they still rejected him because he was not who they expected. They disregarded the miracle that he performed on the shore. They disregarded his mastery over the scriptures, all because the message of the bread of life did not fit into their worldview. Despite all of this, there is tremendous hope at the end of this discourse. Jesus turns to the 12 men that he chose as his apostles, and he gives them this same challenge. He asks them, "Do you also want to leave?" Peter is the one to respond to him. There's something really important that we need to understand about Peter here. In the Gospels, whenever Peter speaks unprompted, he either completely misunderstands what he's saying or he gets it completely wrong. He's a very frustrating character to read. But whenever he is asked a question by Jesus, his response always affirms the truth of Jesus' identity in a very profound way. So how does he respond to this question by Jesus here? Peter says, "Master, to whom shall we go? You are the one who has the words of eternal life. We have come to believe, and we are convinced that you are the Holy One of God." Peter offers us a counter-reaction to the crowds here. He never claims to understand Jesus' message of the bread of life. He doesn't even question Jesus' meaning like the crowds did. But like the crowds, he recognized that Jesus' earlier works affirmed that Jesus was the Messiah. This is enough for Peter to put all of his trust into Christ. There will be plenty of time to understand these words later, but for now, he puts his trust into Christ, and the apostles respond likewise. Peter conforms to Christ, unlike the crowds who expect Christ to conform to them. As we know, Jesus later tells Peter that he will be the rock on which he builds his church. And it was on this foundation of the apostles, led by Peter as their head, that the Catholic Church grew and flourished. And as members of the Catholic Church, we participate in the church built up by Christ by eating the literal flesh of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, just as he commanded to do so in John chapter 6. Peter trusted that this teaching would be understood in due time. Now, in the Eucharist, we fully understand the meaning of the bread of life. Believing in the real presence of Jesus is not always easy. But Jesus gives us enough reason to trust that his words are true, even if we may not understand the meaning of these words right now. This event in the Gospel of John is the foundation of our faith. Through the Catholic Church and through the Eucharist, we receive the bread of life.